Tariffs. Did I get your attention? Because tariffs are going up and tariffs are going down. One thing is happening is they're not going away. My next guest is going to help you protect your profits from those tariffs.
Welcome to Ecommerce Revamped, where we break down the hottest trends, insider tips, and strategies shaping the future of e-commerce. Powered by Miva, the engine behind seamless online stores. Now here's your host, Rob Stanley.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Ecommerce Revamped. I'm Rob Stanley, and I've got a great guest on. So tariffs, big topic right now. Everything's going nuts with tariffs going up and down all over the place. And I'm going to bring in Lyden Smithers. He's going to come into the studio. Lyden, come on in. How you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you, Rob. How you doing, man?
Doing great, doing great. So today's topic is how to protect profits from tariffs the smart way. We're obviously talking about e-commerce. And Lyden, I want to jump right into this because we got a lot to cover. There's a lot going on regarding tariffs, and I want to give you plenty of time. I'm going to hit you with just one right off the get-go. Are lower tariffs, which just happened, kind of a false sense of security?
So I think when I was actually on my way to Sydney to do a presentation around tariffs at the World First event last month, and that was when the crazy stuff started happening. Where it's like, oh, it's 45, now it's 54, now it's 125, now it's 145, and the higher it got, the more comfort I got in that, knowing that this was a negotiation play and it's not going to stay that high. When it was around 50, I'm like, oh, this could stay. But when it got that high, I was pretty sure that it was going to come back down. So whilst I've just been to China with China Magic for China Magic 11, and speaking to that also gave me a lot of comfort, because speaking to a lot of my friends over there, the suppliers, freight forwarders and stuff, no one over there is panicking. Everybody has been sort of told by the government. The government went and visited factories and spoke to them and said, look, we've got about 90 days until this thing settles down and the tariffs come back to normal. And they were sort of reassured in that way. A little bit different to the narrative over in the US and the rest of the world, but there wasn't the panic that we seem to experience. So we're now at 30%, as you know, as of the last couple of days. And we've got 90 days for that to run out before they revisit that and maybe lock in the longer term plan. But I can't see it being too different from the 30%. Whilst it's a little bit of a hit, there are ways, and we'll get into a little bit of different approaches to mitigate those tariffs and make sure we're profitable and our businesses are protected from that and can sustain them. So I don't feel like it's a false sense of security. Tariffs won't go away and they won't be zero. But it is what it is. We've faced tariffs before. We've faced the COVID pandemic when shipping went from $4,000 to $25,000 for a container. So yeah, as long as we have proper businesses that are built with resilience against these things, I don't think there's an issue. So it's not a false sense of security. We never know in this world what they're going to be, but I can't see them going back to the crazy negotiation tactic levels we were looking at before.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they were talking about all these cargo ships sitting kind of off the port of China, actually, like in that area, not heading over here, waiting for the negotiation to happen. So it kind of was interesting. Like, I'm on a lot of different, groups and stuff like that, e-commerce groups, and several of them were like, we're ordering more, because by the time the factory ramps up and makes it, we're pretty sure that if it gets, and when it gets on a cargo ship, it's another 60 days out, right? 30 days to make it, 28 days or whatever, 28 to get to at least Long Beach on the West Coast of the US, California, right? So what kind of mistakes are you seeing that some of the brands are making when it comes to this tariff news?
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that, because whilst I was on the ground at Canton Fair, I was talking to a lot of suppliers, and then a couple of my friends sort of messaged me one day halfway through phase 3. I put a video on Instagram, actually, on the China Magic Instagram, but I was like, Costco and Walmart have just released their ships. So everybody was holding the ships and they just got released. Now, obviously, that was an indication that they were going to swallow the tariffs, or they're going to bonded warehouse or something. But the most likely was they'd got some sort of intel that the tariffs were being lifted. So that sort of gave me the confidence we were coming into this. And then a couple of weeks later, obviously, the announcement. So, yeah, they'd started moving again. What I would say to anybody that was holding is get the ships out quickly, because this pent-up demand, this pent-up demand is going to make the prices for shipping go up. So if anybody's holding anything, I'd get it out now before the prices start to go up. So we might have mitigated the tariff, but shipping prices are going to go up. So I know a lot of people have got stuff being held. I would get that out. And then back to your other question about sort of mistakes. There was a lot of panic, as we said, over in the US and the rest of the world. And people have started to do certain things like send shipments to Malaysia and then get repackaged and made in Malaysia, put on them and then sent in. Now, from what I understand, normally at the customs in the US, about 3% of containers are checked and inspected. That went up to about 30%. Now, if 100 containers, don't know the actual numbers, but 100 containers are leaving Malaysia a day, and that changes to 1,000 leaving a day, then what do you think is going to happen there? That 30% inspection isn't going to be a 30% of them being inspected. There's going to be a lot more. So doing dodgy things like that, I would just try and work away from. And I saw a lot of people trying to move, not in a dodgy way, but move their manufacturing to Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, find other places to make their product, which is absolutely a valid sort of backup plan. And we should have these options on hand. Do we have a certain product that could be made in India or Pakistan or wherever it might be? And do we have a backup factory there? One thing I will say from experience from sourcing a lot of different countries around the world, and more so speaking with Chinese factories that are now opening up backup factories in those areas to avoid the tariff, is that no one has the infrastructure that China has to produce at the quality, the price, and the volume that we do in China. So you're looking at 30-day production time in China. It might be 90 days in Vietnam. Now, that is something. If that's something you can sustain and be able to work with for a slightly higher price for a lower tariff, that's good. That's great. But again, we don't know what's happening with these tariffs. Yes, all of the other countries around the world have a lower tariff than China right now. But what if Vietnam comes up higher? So we just need to be very careful, have our options, but don't panic and start moving your entire supply chain somewhere else, because it's very hard to match the manufacturing power that China has.
100% agree. And, a couple of years ago, it was Mexico. A lot of people were trying to move their manufacturing to Mexico because you could bring it up by truck, get it up here quickly into the US, into the Amazon facilities and everything. And same problem, just they don't have the infrastructure. Now, could it get there? Absolutely. Any one of those countries you just named could absolutely get there at some point. It's going to take some time. So I think we covered tariffs a lot. I want to get in a little more, and I know this is still tariff related, but what's the first kind of tip you could give to help protect some of their profits or even offset some of the tariffs?
Yeah, so a lot of people go straight to what are the tactics or what are the hacks that I can get, right? So to try and mitigate tariffs. But let's say, okay, 54% or whatever the percentage might be is quite a big looking number. Let's reverse engineer that and find out what the actual impact of that tariff is to our bottom line. So our CM3, contribution margin 3, we would call it in Titan, or net profit, if you like. So what is the impact on that net profit? And if it's 5%, for example, why are we trying to find 5% on a cost reduction on COGS? Like, how do we try and find 5% in reduction in COGS? Might be difficult to do, but break down, understand your P&L, which is boring sometimes for some people who aren't that way inclined to look at numbers and spreadsheets. But if you can break down your P&L and see where you can save a few cents on packaging. Can we store in China rather than store in the US and save the 3PL fees? Can we store at our factory's warehouse? Can we get 3 quotes on every shipment for our freight to be able to save a little bit there? Can we save a bit on our PPC and be more efficient there? Can we push our price up slightly? Can we reduce a little bit? Can we change the way that our product is made so that we can reduce the price? Can we go to Canton Fair, find different suppliers, use that as a leverage to bring down the cost of our product? A lot of people will go straight to reducing the cost of the product and just hammering their by email, by WeChat or whatever, and hammering down their supplier to give them a lower price. Now, on average, Chinese suppliers will work on a 10 to 15% margin. Right? If you have a standard factory, that's what they work on. So if you're asking them to reduce by 10%, 15, 20%, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to lower the quality. So it's very important for you to understand how the product's made, what changes can we make that don't change the end result in terms of quality for the end consumer to be able to bring that down? So again, another mistake people make is just hammering down the price. They're going to lose quality. So, and I think the only way to really understand that production line, see how things are made, is to go to China, visit your factory. I know you visited a lot, Rob, as well, and going through and understanding your production line and your product and how it's made. For example, if we've got like a silicone product that's every time a mold is pressed down, it creates 4 units. Can we spend a couple of grand on a new mold that creates 16 units every time that we press? Meaning that we reduce the amount of man hours and time to be able to produce, and we can produce a lot quicker, bringing down the cost. Can we? I've shared this example a few times, but I sell a certain product that has a logo printed on it. And I kept getting, on the inspection, I kept giving the products back. And we were losing money on returns and stuff like that. I went to the factory, said, show me where you put the logos on, which keeps making them crooked. And I went and showed me, and it was some rickety old shitty machine made out of wood. I'm like, is that how you do the logos? I'm like, you're losing money every month when I'm returning them. How much is a new machine? It's $2,000. Do you want to go halves on it, $1,000 each? Yeah, absolutely. And now my logos are perfect, and we got no returns as a result of it. So Chinese suppliers aren't necessarily forthcoming. They're just trying to do what they can, what they've been asked to do. Unless you get into that factory, understand the production line, and work with them as a product developer and figure out the best ways to be more efficient in the supply chain, you'll be very surprised at how much money you can save by really understanding the product and production line properly.
I love that example. That's such a great example. And then, the information you gave, just work with your supplier, that they're a partner of yours, just like anything else. Lyden, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, though, I want to talk to you some more about factories, about different negotiations that you can do with the factories to try to get a little bit of money back. We're going to do that right after this commercial break.
Need an e-commerce platform that's as ambitious as you are? Miva empowers your business with seamless design, top-tier features, and the flexibility to scale. For serious growth and a better online experience, it's got to be Miva. Visit miva.com/podcast and start building success today.
Yeah, so be sure to head on over to miva.com/podcast. Got lots of free downloadables and cool little tips and ebooks and things like that. Listen, I'm on with Lyden Smithers. We're talking about how to protect your profits from tariffs, basically. And you brought a good example up, with working with the factories, the way that they kind of protect their margin and still give you a discount is they need that more volume, right? The more they're buying, let's say, of the raw goods to make your product, they're able to get that at a discount also, which they can pass that along. So, you going in there and just hammering them on, hey, I want a lower price without really kind of being a partner, that's not a good way to do it. And I think you brought up a couple of good examples. It's funny. I was just talking to a seller just a couple of days ago, and I was looking at their product, and I'm like, your box is too big. Have you looked at the dimensions to see if you can get it under the next dimension, which will bring down the price on your storage, bring down the price on the shipping? You got to look at more than just the price you're getting from your manufacturer. So, Lyden, what other things have you seen, or what other things can you maybe tell us that help negotiate with the factories that maybe could offset some of this tariff price by decreasing your price?
Yeah, absolutely. I like the packaging example. It's the biggest thing. Well, I did a quick one on that at BDSS with packaging, because it's something that gets overlooked. Most people buy from their Chinese supplier, ask them what packaging they can provide, and they normally just use the guys down the road or whatever. They're not necessarily a packaging specialist. So a lot of money is lost in packaging. I've saved hundreds of thousands by changing my packaging to supply to someone else and providing that packaging to them. For example, a box we just made in a supplier over there. The box was costing us $1. We went and found the box somewhere else for like 40 cents and then provided them with it. The supplier still buys directly. I then also introduced those two suppliers. My supplier then also has switched to buying the boxes direct from them. They're making more money or passing it on to their other customers, whatever they want to do. And I've made a connection between two great suppliers, and they're both very happy. And it's what we would call guanxi, which is sort of relationships in China, which is all revolving about favors and networking and stuff like that. And it's so important. And then to touch on the point you mentioned about higher volume is how you get the price reductions. Whenever we ask for quotes in the beginning, I always ask for an MOQ of 1,000 units, 5,000, 10,000, and 50,000. And I get different prices based on that. And I make sure I remember those, right? Because as we grow, we're going to be unlocking those. And they won't just bring it up and say that, oh, you get a discount because you're ordering this much. But I like to get those in. And then what I do is I always go into every meeting, every meeting and negotiation with a forward 12-month or 24-month plan. So here's over the next 12 months, rather than tell them I want to order 3,000 units today, over the next 12 months, I want to order 20,000 units. That's going to be broken down into these orders, but 20,000 units is what I want to order. And then we're talking about the partnership rather than just the transaction, as you mentioned, Rob, and what we're going to be doing over time. That means they can plan ahead with their raw material supply, use that forecast to go and buy the raw materials, and also consolidate it with where they're buying for other suppliers, with other customers of theirs, to be able to negotiate lower raw material costs. So it's all about the long-term future. And these are keywords you need to be dropping in there: partnership, long-term future, and the forecast and what's going to happen and growth and things that we're going to be doing in the future, rather than just focusing on the order you've got right now. So showcasing that you're going to be growing and what the total order value over the next 12 or 24 months will absolutely unlock a lower price there too.
So I got a question to ask you regarding that, because I had something similar we used to do where we would ask for the different ranges for the different quantities, when we were first getting started with a factory. So let's take that example of, let's say you're going to do 20,000 units over, 6 months or something like that. Yeah. One of the things we did, and let me know if you did something similar, is we told them we were going to do, let's say, 20,000 units over the next 6 months. And what we did is we gave them a PO for 20,000. And then what we did is we were able to get that 20,000 price point, but we didn't have to buy it all at once or provide the money all at once. What we did is in a couple thousand, 2,000 to 5,000 blocks, basically. Yep. But again, at that 20,000 unit price point, which was awesome because, we got that great price and we knew we were going to move that many over time. So there's another thing people can negotiate right there. And I loved your example, by the way, of finding the box manufacturer. All the factories over there, they're going to use the closest or fastest person that's near them, and not necessarily the cheapest. Right? Yeah, exactly. I've seen that. One thing I'm going to point out, this is kind of a tip too. You mentioned going over there. I definitely agree with going over to China. You should be at your factories understanding it. The other thing is, when you're in their warehouse or in their showroom, look at what else they're making, because sometimes we found that we didn't realize they were making other products, and we're like, can you make that for us and change it, change these specs on it and do this and that? They're like, yeah. All of a sudden, all they were doing is piggybacking on an order we already had, and we were able to do some small quantity trial runs, which built up into a whole new product line. So that was kind of a cool thing.
Absolutely. And in that as well, Rob, you can see all the other, whether it's a product that you want to sell or not, you can see the other brand names. You see the packaging, you see what other brands they're making for. You make a list of those other brands. You might unearth that they're making products for, well, I've walked into one factory that makes sort of apparel for us, and they're making like dressing gowns for Mont Blanc, and they're dry. They've just put them in the washing machine. They're drying them in the dusty car park. Hilarious white Mont Blanc dressing gowns, right? That doesn't get me into trouble anywhere. But it's funny just to see the type of products. But then you can go on those brand websites and on their Amazon stores if they're an Amazon seller and see what the reviews are like. And then, of course, you can see the quality and understand it while you're there, but you know for a fact if the quality's there or not, and you can see exactly what people are saying about that product. So it's a really good way to understand whether they continue their product from golden sample throughout the production line.
Absolutely. And most of the time, if you got a good quality manufacturer, they're usually, the next item is going to be just as good a quality if you've done multiple runs already and not having any issues with it. Listen, I know you and I've talked many times. I've seen you talk. I remember one time you mentioned something about like a tariff engineering or something like that. Does that ring a bell? There was something regarding the tariffs and or the drawbacks or something like that. Help us a little more with understanding on, the tariffs, how they work, how could people adjust to them? Give us a little more information.
Yeah, as I say, I'm very much in build a resilient business save at the source, and the success is in the buying, not just the selling, right? And it's really important. But there are things that we can do reactively to tariffs, which is obviously using bonded warehouses. And there are things that you can do with like invoice splitting, so that you can split the invoice so that you're splitting out the service fees versus the actual COGS, which is obviously labor or whatever. You're able to do things like that. And we actually have a full class on this, and I'll maybe share it. If anybody reaches out to me afterwards, I'll send you a link to the class that we did recently with all these different strategies. But yeah, there's also the use of free zone, duty-free zones and bonded warehouses and all those things. So I can share the recording of the sort of tariff reaction thing that we did, but I always come back to just making sure that we're building a resilient business and making sure we got the best possible price. Because what happens is, to excuse the pun, everybody's in the same boat on this thing. And what happens with a tariff increase is eventually the consumer pays. There's going to be an increase in price. Now, if you leverage those tariffs to reduce your costs and get as efficient as possible, when everybody pushes their prices up, you might not need to push up as high and still hit the profit margins. You can take market share that way. So whilst there's a lot of things that we can do and get very creative, DDP shipping, again, is one thing that a lot of people do, is deliver duties paid rather than declaring and being the importer of record ourselves and paying the tariff separately. We can use a freight forwarder to take the responsibility of declaring the duties that need to be paid. And they do that at customs for us. And it tends to be cheaper. It tends to be a gray area. So you should really educate yourselves on what's actually happening and what liability you have, which the beauty is you don't tend to have liability. It's on the freight forwarder, but you do still tend to run the risk of, if there was an inspection and something wasn't quite right in what they were declaring, you could lose the stock if the fine wasn't paid by the freight forwarder. Most of the time, the fine is paid, and there's a delay in getting the stock out of customs. But DDP is an option to try and reduce that. But I would just look at all your different options and use, if you sell on Amazon, use Amazon AGL and AWD warehousing versus DDP shipping versus DDU shipping. Making sure that one thing you can do is obviously your HTS code, which is your classification for what duties you do need to pay on the product, and making sure that you're in the most efficient one for you. As an example, my wife Georgie used to sell yoga mats, and the yoga mat was something like, or an acupressure mat, one of the products was at 40%. She changed it to gym mat rather than yoga mat, and it reduced to like 7%. So I wouldn't change a yoga mat to a phone case, right? But I would change it to something that makes complete sense. And normally that's easier to do when you haven't already shipped under a HTS code. Rather than changing it, you might want to change SKU and stuff as well when there's a record for it in customs. But on a new product, just make sure you're getting the most efficient HTS code that makes sense and you're not manipulating. So there are options there too.
I love that tip. And you know what? That was a viable change. Like calling it a gym mat, 100% viable. You could absolutely call it that. Yeah. Whether you sell it under that, that's a whole different thing. Lyden, I want to know, backing up slightly, but I've heard a lot of sellers, they're sticking with China right now, but they're starting to look for other factories to kind of ramp up a secondary backup factory. Sure. I've heard Vietnam, I've heard India. What have you seen when it comes to a backup factory other than China? Where have you seen people kind of turning to first?
Yeah, and it's interesting because some of the guys I know over there have opened up their own factories or started to look into it. Open up. It's normally Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. You've got India and Pakistan that already do a lot of manufacturing. Just need to make sure that your product can be made in that country. As I said earlier, it's very hard to find the infrastructure in other countries to produce the quality, volume, and price that you do in China, but it is worth having a backup. And speaking to some of the suppliers over there, I sort of asked in one of the booths that I went into, so what if I want to make this backpack we were talking about? What if I can make this backpack in your factory in Vietnam rather than in China? They're like, that's okay, but the MOQ is 20,000 units. Because we have to buy the material, then we have to send it from China to Vietnam, and the production time's 90 days. Now, I've normally got a 5,000 MOQ and a and a 30-day production time. So you have to just take into those things into account. But as long as your supply chain is planned out ahead and you're able to do that, it's possible. So the only other thing I would say is that I'm very big, and if people have heard me speak before, I focus on sort of cash flow and payment terms. And some of the payment terms I have with my suppliers, like 10% deposit and 90% 180 days later. I mean, I can sell the product 3 times before I have to pay for it, right? So to be able to get those payment terms, it's very hard to get them in the US, UK. It's very hard to get them in India or Pakistan. I've tried, believe me. Mexico, I've sourced from as well. It's very hard to get those types of payment plans. Now, it depends on whether you've got a load of cash sat in the bank, but borrowing money is expensive, right? Particularly in this economic world that we're currently in, or climate we're in, it's very expensive to borrow cash. So I leverage payment terms with my supplier and the trust that I have through visiting China 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year, visiting my factories and extending these payment terms so that I haven't got to pay for the cash and hurt my margins, which again comes back to the tariff thing. If you've got payment terms instead of borrowing cash, that margin is alleviated slightly as well, because you're not paying for expensive cash for growth, and your supplier is essentially your partner, as we've already mentioned and keep repeating. They're your partner in your growth, and they're helping you grow exponentially through good payment terms and launch faster and get to where you want to be quicker.
Absolutely. And please do not ask for those terms right when you talk to a factory you've never done business with. This is a buildup of a relationship and a partnership, and those things come with that. My old company, we had a big factory in India, and we had, I think, 90-day terms or something also with our factory over there. So, those are things you build up to, but I don't think we got those terms until like we were almost 2 years into doing a lot of volume with them and a lot of different new products and everything. So this is definitely not something you ask for off the get-go.
Yes, I would agree. It's very difficult to get 180 days off the bat, but I've just been in China with some of the guys that came on China Magic with me, and that would be the belief. But we came away from factories with 90-day terms straight out the gate on the first order. So it's all about that face-to-face interaction, building that relationship, and the way that you present it and what you have to leverage. If you have a business that you're already running and you're doing $500,000 in orders, and you say, my current factory won't give me terms, and they're at this price. If you can give me a better price and I can move the entire production to you guys, if your quality is good enough, would you give me 90-day terms to get this business? Yes, I would. But it does take some time. You do have to spend some time. But I do come out of booths in Canton Fair with those terms straight off the bat. But you have to leverage it in the right way. Yes, they're hungry for business. Yes, they're there and you're in the driving seat, but you've got to sell yourself as well. This has to be a win-win situation. You can't go in and go, here's my terms. They go, who are you? If you go in there and say, look, I'm doing $100 million per year on Amazon across all these different brands. I've got this. I've been coming to China a long time. I'm working with these different factories. I've got the bestseller badge on this product. I'm able to move things to you. Then those conversations open up. But you need to be asking the right questions as well. Just by going in there with the likes of myself or one of my team, and asking the right questions like, what's the MOQ? Where's the factory? Can I visit the factory? How many workers do you have? What certifications do you have? Who's your biggest customer? Do you sell to other Amazon companies? And if you ask all these questions, you're automatically presenting yourself as a professional person and somebody they want to do business with. You want them fighting for your business as much as you're looking to get from them. So whilst typically it takes time to build that relationship, you can, by going to China, Canton Fair, for example, and of course, come with us on China Magic, but coming to Canton Fair, for example, meeting them, 2 days later, you're in the factory, you're having dinner and beers with them in the evening. Those things can happen. They're not going to happen on Alibaba. They're not going to happen on 1688 for sure, but they can happen face-to-face. I always talk about guanxi, which means relationships in China, and the importance of that, and taking a gift and all of the little details signals that you give them that you're going to be a good partner. Absolutely, you can get good terms off the bat.
Absolutely. Listen, we could go on for a long time on this. Lyden, I know that you're deep into this, and you and I both have been there and done a lot of this. But I want people to understand. Everybody's probably looking, or you probably heard me say, Lyden's actually with a company or with a organization called Titan. I'd love for you to, by the way, one of my favorite groups, by the way, got to hang out with them for 3 years. Got to throw that in there. But Lyden, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Titan, what you guys do, the different like extras that Titan does, and how they go above and beyond helping sellers.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll actually start with China Magic, which I've mentioned a couple of times because I'm excited off the back of just taking a load of sellers to Canton Fair. So China Magic is a 12-day across phase 2 and phase 3 of Canton Fair, where we take you to the fair and all those things I just mentioned. We're asking the right questions, teaching you how to do that, the product development, how to present the forecast, and my 6-step guide to getting better payment terms and better pricing, how to visit the factory, what questions to ask, what gifts to take, where to sit, what order to do the factory tour in, and be able to build that relationship and get what you want out of it. We take people twice a year during Canton Fair. We've just done number 11. I'm doing number 12 in October. But the reason I mentioned that first before Titan Network is that's where Titan was born. My business partner, Athena, and my other business partner, Dan, but Athena created China Magic a long time ago, back in 2015, I think, 2016. Dan and I were invited to go along to it, and we helped to deliver the sort of training and stuff over there. And then what we realized is that after 12 days of intense mentoring, hand-holding, community, working together, and all this beauty and magic that came out of that trip on China, everybody goes back to their spare room and their office like this, and they're on their own at home, right? And it became a lonely place. Out of that was built Titan Network. And Titan Network was a place that we could do this thing all year round, not just for 2 weeks in April and 2 weeks in October in China. And within Titan Network, we have strategy, and not just from me or Dan or Athena, but from 30 or 40 leaders and mentors, all inputting through different experiences in different categories and different countries and different marketplaces and TikTok and Shopify, and not just Amazon, all feeding in to create cutting edge strategy and frameworks that allow you to build a resilient foundational business from the ground up. And then we have the community there where you're able to help each other. We have live events, which Rob, you've been to a lot of our events and had a lot of fun at. And then obviously the tech. So our strategies, we've built a tool set underneath that to help you deliver efficiently the frameworks. And they have weekly huddles depending on your group. It's not just one size fits all and you all go into one pot and you've got people just starting out with $100 million sellers. You go into a group where you're best suited around those types of people. And our job is to expedite your growth through your e-commerce journey. And we have weekly huddles based on where you're at in your group. And then work parties where we talk about sourcing and all the stuff we're talking about today. We talk about Shopify and TikTok and marketing and exit and all these things. So there's a lot of calls every week where you can get access to very smart people and just interact with everybody. So that's what Titan Network is. And it was born from originally China Magic.
Yeah. The funny thing is I probably walked by you guys at some point in Guangzhou at Canton Fair, because I went there almost every year, I think from probably about 2009 on until 2018. But so it's probably funny we were there probably at the same time. This is what I always like to tell people. If you're not selling on Amazon and you don't even know where to start, I get a hold of Titan. They have a program for that. If you're currently selling on Amazon and maybe you're struggling either with your product or how to come up with a second product, I would get a hold of Titan. They can handle both of those type of situations. Definitely a great support group. You're going to be held accountable, which you should be. But not just held accountable, but you're going to have mentors that are going to answer those questions, just like Lyden is right now. You know, you can obviously tell he knows what he's talking about when it comes to tariffs. Lyden, if people want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you? Go ahead and let everybody know who are listening, and I'll flash up on the screen the information.
Yeah, of course. So I think the best thing, depending on what you want to do, is just email me directly. So if you go to email hello@lydensmithers.com. Just email me. And if it's something that you're interested in, maybe China Magic, or you want to know a bit more about Titan Network, you can do that. If you go to titannetwork.com, you can find out a bit more. There's a video on there. You can find out a bit more about the Titan Network. And then ChinaMagicTrip.com if you want to find out a bit more about that. But if you want to reach out to me by email, or I have a pretty uncommon name, so you'll easily find me on Instagram or Facebook, and just reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer any questions that you might have about tariffs or what we spoke about today, or find out more about how we can maybe help you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hello, HELO at Lyden, LYDEN, Smithers, SMITHERS.com. And of course, if you want to reach out to Titan Network, it's TITANNETWORK.com. Again, one of my favorite groups, and love always seeing Lyden, his wife, and the whole crew over there at Titan. They're always good people and always great to have on because they know what they're talking about. They live and breathe this all the time. This is not something new to them. So Lyden, thank you so much for coming on and for talking about such a current hot topic right now. I really do appreciate you jumping in here with me and going over this and trying to help people really save some money and understand what's going on with the tariffs and hopefully how to offset at least some of it and definitely negotiate with those factories. Really appreciate your time here. We'll thank you so much again, and we'll see everybody on the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to Ecommerce Revamped. Ready to take your e-commerce business to the next level? Visit Miva.com for the tools to build seamless online stores and unforgettable customer experiences. Until next time, keep your carts full and your customers happy.